I want to begin directly with you. Empowering means it is not just empowering women. What do you mean by empowering the voices?
Well, Satish, empowering voices means empowering all the depressed, suppressed voices. Okay? But when we talk about empowering, we always talk about only women and Dalit. Okay? And we always try to equate both the issues, Dalit and women issues. But that's not the case in its real sense. And empowering means, according to me, is a shift in the sensibility. It's not a mere shift in the perspective or not making, laws, you know, to protect women and Dalits. That's not the case. That's why the question of social justice, the question of gender is still alive. We are still facing so many, challenges. So empowering means, a change, a real change in the mindset, in the sensitivity.
If you take the context of India, we have been independent from last 78 years, and the process of empowering the voices what we have, especially not only women and Dalits, tribes and minorities and have-nots, everything comes into picture. What is your view on that?
Over past 3 or 4 decades, we are trying to develop a very important concept in feminism, that is rehistory. Rehistory and narration. When we say rehistory, it is not that we can change the history, but definitely we can change our perspective and our sensibility towards history. For example, we have got so many, women models before us in India, whether it is Sita, Draupadi, Ahalya, Shakuntala, so many models we have got. Let me take the example of Sita. Sita, we call her as Chaya Viktitva. She's behind Rama all the time. She follows Rama. She's the follower of Rama. All those things. But according to me, Sita is one of our primordial feminists. I call Sita feminist mainly because she's got the strength to shape her own life. She tries her level best to compromise, to save her family, all those things. She tries her level best, but at the end of it, when it comes to it, she says no. She says no. And the world, the patriarchy, doesn't know how to, react to her protest, her resistance. So the patriarchy tries to hush her in the, earth. Okay. There is a wonderful poem by Kumaran Ashan. I'm sure all the Malayalam, audience are very fond of Kumaran Ashan. Way back in 1928, probably, he writes a poem called Chinta Vishtayaya Sita. Chinta Vishtayaya Sita. That's the evening where she is waiting for her children to come back. She has taught him the story of, Ramayana to Lava and Kusha. They have gone to spread the story of Ramayana to the whole world. She knew the fact that Rama is going to come back with her children, Lava and Kusha. And she thinks that what should I do if Rama comes and if she asks me to come back to Ayodhya? Should I go or not? Should I go or not? She thinks, and at the end of it, she comes to a conclusion. She says, I don't have to go. I don't have to go with Rama. She says, let me live my life with all self respect. And I have got a Kannada translation of that poem. First, let me read it in Kannada and then I'll translate it into English. The last stanza of the poem, it's a long poem. We can even call it as a mini epic. Chinta Vishtayaya Sita. ಪ್ರಿಯ ರಾಘವನೇ ನಿನಗೆ ವಂದನೆಯು ನಿನ್ನ ತೋಳುಗಳ ಆಶ್ರಯವ ತೊರೆದು ನಾ ಕಟ್ಟ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರಳಾಗಿ ನಿರ್ಭಯಳಾಗಿ ಉನ್ನತಾಕಾಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೇಲಕ್ಕೇರುತ್ತಿಹೆನು. Dear Rama, thanks to you, but now I'm going out of your shelter. I'm going out of the shelter of your arms But now I'm a liberated soul. I'm a liberated soul. Now I'm going up and up and up in the sky. See, this is what I call rehistory. See, in 1928, if Kumaran Ashan can write a poem like this, he's trying to respect, he's trying to establish Sita with her own identity. With her own identity. See, but in the common sense, always we look for Sita as a follower of husband. As she has accepted the patriarchy, as she has accepted the what is that pyramid of the power structure of marriage, all those things. But that is not the case with Sita. See, if you look into any folk poems, any folk stories all over the world, all over India, Sita is not a weak human being. Only in established classics, she is a weak woman. Okay, but when it comes to folk stories, she is a very strong woman. So this is what I call rehistory. You need to reshape all the women icons which have been presented to us as role models. You take the example of Draupadi. They always say that Draupadi is the strongest character of Mahabharata. But in its real sense, she is the weakest character. Okay, Sita, in silence, in her self-respect, she tries to establish her identity and her right to shape her own life. Okay, when it comes to Shakuntala, when it comes to Ahalya, you can examine all these things. There is a very interesting pattern in Kannada. All the three important writers of Kannada, one is Masti Venkatesh Iyengar, you must have heard of his name. Another one is Vaidehi, and the last one is Veena Shanteshwar. In these three narrations, the first story is named as Hemakutadinda Bandamele, after I returned from Hemakuta. And the second story is by Veena Shanteshwar. It is titled as Nirakarane. And the third story is Shakuntalayondige Kaleda Aparahana, an afternoon with Shakuntala. There is such a wonderful shift in the character of Shakuntala. In the first story of Masti, Masti tries to fix her in the pattern, in the canvas of patriarchy. She is so, sorry, she is so saddened. She says, oh, my life is over, Dushyanta has cheated me, all those things. But when it comes to Nirakarane, this was written in 1968, she says, Shakuntala says, I am ready to come back to your palace. She says to Dushyanta, I am ready to come back only as a mother, not as your wife. So she tries to reject Dushyanta as her husband. Okay, that is Nirakarana, that means rejection. When it comes to the third story of Vaidehi, she says, Shakuntala says, the whole world says I am a defeated woman. But no, I have lived my life. Dushyanta was my choice. My marriage with Dushyanta was also my choice. I wanted to have the experience of motherhood, which I have got with this marriage. Well, all the marriages are not going to end till the end. It is broken, that's fine. But she says, with all that, I am the happiest person. I have no regrets and I have no charge sheet against Dushyanta. See, this is the typical modern women. Okay, so what those writers have done is that they have looked into those characters with a different perspective, with a modern perspective, or I can even say they try to relocate Shakuntala and they try to picturize Shakuntala in her real self. So this is what we mean by rehistory. Okay, so empowering means it's not just that we need to change the contemporary world. It's also to change the past. Only then we can change the future.
Whenever we say empowering the voices, we only refer it to women empowering. The other phases of this word is, if you take India as an example, what about the Dalits and tribals and minorities?
I agree with that. But there is a categorical difference between the fight of the women and fight of the Dalit, because these women are even exploited by the Dalit husbands, Dalit family. That makes all the difference. Okay, but at the same time, Why I look into or look up to Dalit fight as our forefront fighters, mainly because they are showing us the way in a way. They are showing us the way, but at the same time, we are also understanding that the challenges of Dalits are are very, what should I say, Murta. We can see them, we can understand them. But when it comes to women's challenges, it's very, very deep, it's very complex. It's very complex. Oh, see, Akka says in one of her vachanas, Kichillada bege, yerillada gaya. You can't see the wound, but there is a wound. You can't see the fire, but she's being affected by that fire of inequality, that fire of exploitation, that fire of rejection, that fire of every other humiliation.
If you go back to the South Indian literature, yesterday I was talking to Madhavan in Volga, and Madhavan mentioned a very important point, saying that this empowering the voices, especially women voices in literature, is far ahead in terms of Tamil and Kannada, and we are far behind in Malayalam. And especially Akka Mahadevi and the Vachanakartas.
Not only Akmadevi, Satish, what
I
feel
want
is,
you to
yeah.
explain that process, what happened in Kannada literature.
I
and
totally agree with
Tamil and
Madhavan when he says, Kannada feminist thinking is far ahead from that of other Indian languages. I have no question regarding this, because our feminist tradition starts from Allama himself. When Allama wrote, Hennu Maye Alla. There are two myths about women, right? One is the myth of Devi, and the another is the myth of demon. Okay? So we say that no, we are not both. Neither we are Devis nor we are demons. Okay? We are just human beings. Treat us like human beings and give us all the opportunities, give us all the rights to us. Okay? That has been, as you said, has been strongly established by our 12th century women Vachanakaras. Okay? Whether it is Akmadevi, whether it is Neelamma, whether it is Kadire Remmave, whether it is Sule Sankave or Amuge Rayamma, all those women writers, they try to establish women's identity from their own efforts. It's not just the external support. We always say that it's because of the support of the other Vachanakaras, say Baswanna, Allama, Chanbaswanna, all those things. It is there. It is there as the moral support. But the inner strength of those women, that makes all the difference, I believe. Because that medieval bhakti era is common to pan-Indian context, right? But if you look into other women, metaphysical poets of other parts of India, these women Vachanakaras of Karnataka are totally different. The kind of intellectual clarity they have got is something amazing. I can even say, even to the feminist theoretical positions of 20th century, have got so much to learn from those 12th century women Vachanakaras. In one of her Vachanas, Akka says, is husband the owner of the house? No. Is wife the owner of the house? No. Neither the husband nor the wife. Look at the kind of equal platform they try to, and the kind of decentralized pattern of family, or the way they are trying to break the pyramid of the power structure of family and marriage. They are trying to break it, and they could do that. Akka could lead her life with her terms and conditions, isn't it? I mean, this is something
that is 400 years back, almost.
That is 900
100
years
back.
900 years back, she could do this.
Now we are thinking of that equality.
Yeah, even now we are thinking of giving them education. We are trying to make them literate. But at that point of time, they could lead their life on their terms and conditions. That is something very, very important. Probably that is the beginning of the Kannada feminist tradition. And that has continued even to this day, I believe, because in 1960s, people like Vijaya Dabbe, and in 1970s, people like V.N. Sumitra Bai, all those people, they try to, strongly establish the pattern of feminist thinking and re-narrate the Kannada literary tradition, Kannada cultural tradition, with the eyes of feminism.
What is the reason for Kannada or Karnataka to be in the forefront, according to you?
Mainly because with all the resistance, the women writers and the kind of support from the, if I can say, I don't want to say though, mainstream criticism, the kind of support we got from the mainstream criticism, that runs through probably in the blood of Kannada probably. I don't know because if we think of D.R. Nagaraj or Manu Chakravarti, the kind of moral strength, the support they gave to feminist thinking is something remarkable. And also the writers. Say for example, Veena Shanteshwar, when she wrote a short story called Gandasaru, men. If you read that story even to this day, she wrote it in 1960s. You can't believe that even today can we write a story like that. That is something very, very amazing. See, they have faced all sorts of challenges. Okay, a very important critic of Kannada told after reading this story, no one should read this story. No one should read this story. One should boycott this story. When Veena Shanteshwar wrote that story, but our women writers could withstand all these challenges. Or even Pratibha Nandkumar, who is writing even to this day. Probably she is one of our very important women writers of India as such. See, people always tries to brand women who are honest. They try to name them as bold, isn't it? Bold, but that is not the case with men writers. Okay, Adrienne Rich, whom we call as the mother of feminism, she says, if I learn to express my experience as a woman with its entirety, with its physicality, without self-censorship, I'll be writing a new language. Okay, I think our women writers, see, it's not that just in Kannada, but even in Malayalam, if we read writer like Kamala Das, she's so amazing. She's so amazing. In one of her interviews, she says, wow, how should a woman should react when a rape has happened to her? She says, if our hands are dirty, we go to bathroom, we use soap, we wash our hands, and we can see that our hands are clean. That should be the case. That should be the reaction of a woman when it comes to the incidents of rape. Is it not an empowering voice, Satish? I mean, it is such a voice, one should learn. And at this juncture, let me mention one more point. Empowering is not just about women, it's also about men. Even men should get empowered. In the sense, even they are also, under so many myths. They think that they are on top of the patriarchy, on top of the power structure. That's an illusion they are living in. Though they are basically entirely dependent on women, whether it is emotionally or intellectually, they are not ready to accept it. Isn't it? Even they should come out of the illusion. That's what Gandhi said when he says they are separate but equal. They are separate but equal. That should be the attitude. It's a long process. Even Gandhi himself has undergone a very historical journey when it comes to empowerment of women, because in the first stage of his life, Gandhi used to say, when she was raped, she should think of only death. She should hang herself. She should kill herself. That's what Gandhi used to say. In the second stage of his life, Gandhi says, no, no, no. In those circumstances, she should use the two instruments, he says. One is teeth and the another one is the nail, he says, okay. And at the third stage, he says, she should just, reject all those things. Mentally, she's so powerful, she should not bother about all these things. And at the end of it, he writes, in one of his editorials in Harijan, he writes, communalism is a very, very crucial disease of India. If you really want to cure this disease, make women as your leaders. Make women as your leaders. See, this is the process of empowerment. See, Gandhi has become a feminist not in one day. Earlier, yeah, it is a process. Earlier, he was a typical MCP. He was a typical MCP, when he tried to throw Kasturba in South Africa. And and Kasturba says, what a tragedy. Let's go inside, she says. And I feel Gandhi's major influences are from women, from his mother and from his wife. In his two, those, wonderful weapons, as we say, Satyagraha and Ahimsa, he has borrowed those two from women, and I have no doubt about it. Okay, so this is the process of empowerment, according to me.
In this process, is caste and religion played a biggest hurdle for this empowerment of voices?
Of course, religion is the first, foremost, basic enemy of women, because they try to, use women as source and as instrument. We say, for the people, of the people. No, religion, they always say for the people, for women, by women. No, women is the, what should I say? She is the ultimate victim when it comes to religion. So, we need to fight the very pattern of religion. The way religion treats women is the real threat to women. Where, irrespective of, you name any religion, whether it's Hinduism, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christian, everywhere that is the case. Everywhere. Way back in, I think, 19th century, beginning, or no, end of the 19th century, a father writes in France, he says, God, these people are asking me to listen to a woman. Imagine myself listening to a woman. Huh, better I die. That's what he says. And let me not talk about other religions, which are so obvious and which are so against women. Which are so against women. They always try to make women as their, weapon. They try to make her as, what should I say? She's the source. One of our freedom fighter, I believe he told, this is a pre-independence statement. He says, if you really want to take control over other religion, the only way left out is you rape the women of that religion. So this is the kind of, picture they have got. This is the kind of space, this is the kind of personality, they have given.
How to overcome this? Because the thing is always, in many ways, religion and caste are playing a major role and major hurdles. In every aspect of life, if you take India as an example, in your view, how do you think that we can overcome it and we can empower more and make those voices heard and give them a space?
Satish, I sincerely feel you should make women as your leaders. As your leaders. I think probably some 15 years back, Prajavani, a leading newspaper in Karnataka, had started a debate on caste. How to overcome caste. They had asked me to write a piece on it. I told them caste was never an issue to women. She can easily cross over the belts of caste.
Do you think so?
I think so. And not that I think, I am convinced of it. I'm convinced of it. It's because of the barriers, the kind of pressures, they got from the family or from the society, they're in the structure of caste and religion. Otherwise, they are the Vishwamanava, as Kuvempu says. Because that is the basic quality of women, Basically, she is inclusive. Basically, women is inclusive.
But the word,
that's why I call feminism a very inclusive
but the word is not inclusive. That's the
that's why I'm
that's the question I'm going to ask you next.
See, feminism is basically totally different from any other political ideology the civilization has produced till now. Okay, all those political ideologies, or you can even call them as lokadrishti, they are against something, and they try to be very exclusive, whether it's Marxism, whether it's socialism, whether it's Orientalism, you name anything. Okay? But that is not the case with feminism, because we are not against anyone. We are against that value system. They always tries to, what should I say, misinterpret feminism. It's against men. No, that's not the case. And it is not a fight. It is not a war. It is not a competition. Okay? It is a historical journey. Okay? It's a historical journey wherein we, the women, believe that even men will come with us. It's a journey hand in hand with men and women. We are going, and it's a journey towards humanism. It's a journey towards humanism. Okay, so that's why now that the world is facing a kind of scarcity, it doesn't have any political ideology before it to follow. I think it is feminism which is going to, which is going to be adopted by the civilization in the next years. There is a very popular folk story, all of us are know. Probably, I am sure it's there in Malayalam also. It's the story of rabbit and tortoise. Rabbit and tortoise, okay? Slow and steady wins the race. That's the moral of the story we always used to say. I think that story applies to feminism in a metaphorical way. That's what I sincerely feel.
But sometimes I feel that because see, thing is, when we are talking here, we are talking about the literature and that word, and in reality, with all this feminism and all these empowering voices, and the thing is, we are not so much inclusive. In case of women also, even to give 33% reservation for them, we are still struggling. And
Who is
even if we give,
responsible for that?
e- e-
Who is responsible for that?
as a society, we are all responsible.
So, the charge sheet is against the system.
System.
So, I agree. There was a big gap when it comes to women's discourse. Feminist thinkers were different, and our activists are different, academicians were different. But at this point of time, we have realized that it's only in the solidarity we can run the show of this women's discourse. So, but at the same time, let's discuss about the patterns of patriarchy, which, though they have changed and they are changing. Are they really changed? We don't know, because it's a very complex thing. Probably in the beginning of the 20th century, we were under the impression that it is the education, it is the job opportunity, and it is the economic independence. They are the main doors of women empowerment. But now that the world has proved that they are not the major issues.
Part
Even
of it.
yeah,
They're part
they are
of it.
mere part of it. And at one point, we even used to think that when law is supporting us, we can come out of all these things. But even that has proved wrong. They are there to support us at the time of crisis, that too, moral support. We can say 10 to 20%. But the rest is, that's why, since the beginning, I'm telling you, it's the question of sensibility. See, once I had invited Pratibha Ray, one of our Gnanpita awardee, to Bangalore for a program. Then I asked her, even I'll be reaching Bangalore tomorrow morning, you're reaching this night, at 10 was her flight. Is it okay for you to take a taxi and go to your son's place, or you want someone to escort you? She said, though I am 82 years old, do you think I'm safe in this country? I need someone to escort me. It's not just the question of that country. It's a question of the globe. It's a question of the globe. See, and one more important point I would like to highlight here is, nowadays, that process of women connect is happening. Women connect. I think long back when Hillary Clinton visited India, Delhi, a poet called Ansuya Sen Gupta, she gave a poem to her. The poem begins like this. Too many women in too many countries speak the same language of silence. Too many women in too many countries speak the same language of silence. She quotes this poem in her autobiography, where she tries to discuss her challenges with Mr. Bill Clinton. She says, I wanted to take a divorce so many times, but I could not take that decision. And she writes in that autobiography, Hillary Clinton writes, no, taking decision is easy for men because they are not attached to families. Taking decision is a big issue for women because we are so attached to family.
But on the there is a contrast, no. See, thing is, we one hand we talk about the empowering the women and all voiceless people. On the other hand, the atrocities and the whatever things should not happen is happening day and night on the same voiceless people. Then what are we doing in this country actually?
Tipu Sultan's minister writes, he writes, we are not afraid of what we see. We are afraid of what we cannot see. Let me quote a story from Malayalam. The name of the story is Madness. Okay, it is written by B.M. Suhara. You must have heard of her name. She is a well-educated woman married to a well-educated man. Okay. Every day she used to do everything like a typical, role model housewife. She used to do everything, Everyone used to, give her an example. No, she look at her, look at her, look at her. Okay. She used to get up at 4 in the morning, early in the morning. Unless and until she gets up at 4 o'clock, she won't be able to send her children school, she can't prepare the lunch for her husband, all those things. One fine day, when the alarm rings at the early in the morning, suddenly an idea, a feeling comes to her mind. What happens? What happens if I don't get up today? She just sleeps. Okay? Second time alarm rings. Husband says, this is the second time alarm is singing. Get up, get up. She says, I'm not going to get up. I was shocked. Oh, what's wrong with this woman? Third time the alarm rings. Then he just opens her spread and he says, get up, get up. She says, I'm not going to get up today. Then what should I do? You do. You do. And he says, where is the banana to bake, to put it in the lunch box of the children? She says, it's over. You go and get it from the shop. He goes. He brings the banana. Then she asks him, will you please get me the newspaper? He brings the newspaper. He also brings a cup of tea and tells her, you just drink this tea and come back. Work is waiting for you. She says, no, I'm not going to come. While having her tea and reading the newspaper, she says, this is the ultimate moment of my life. I had missed all this from past 15 years. Somehow, he gets his children ready and they go to school, all those things. Then he says, now I'll go to, bath and you prepare the box for me. She says, no, let me take bath. While taking bath, she thinks that, God, ages have passed. I used to take bath only after 12, 11, when the home is empty. Okay? She comes back, she locks herself in the room wearing a new sari. And she's thinking that, no, I should call my mother. I always used to call my mother in the afternoon. Let me call her today in the morning. After wearing the sari, she tries to open the room, but it was locked from the outside. She can hear the voice of her husband had called the mental hospital people to send an ambulance. He was talking to the doctor and he was saying that, God, something is seriously
she has
wrong
gone
with
mad,
this. Yeah,
mad.
she has gone mad. Something is seriously wrong with this woman. All these years, she was such a obedient, perfect homemaker. What's wrong with her? After hearing all these words, she knocks the door and the door and she requests her husband, please open the door, please open the door. It's just for the fun, just for the change. I did this. Please open the door. At the end of the story, doors was not opened.
See, when it comes to inclusiveness, we will take them up to the one level. We will never allow women in any level, from the bottom or the top of the pyramid, even in the parliament. We will never allow them to speak. We will never allow them to take a decision, and we will never allow them to rule. What do you think about it, and what will be the solution? See, because
Solution is Sati should change his sensibility, Girish Kasarvali should change his sensibility. You should change in such a way that you should be ready to accept it. Okay? See, politically correct attitude is the biggest enemy of women empowerment. They always say, yeah, there is a seminar going on, 10 people we need, put 2 or 3 women. Yeah, that's the end of it. That is not the case. That's not going to solve the problem.
it happens in Gram Panchayat level to Parliament level. Wife will be the elected representative, and husband will be the ruler.
Yeah, he decides to which file she has to sign.
Yeah, that happens even in, I think in Kerala it's also happening. There are a lot of women representatives.
Everywhere it's happening.
Yeah, everywhere it is happening.
So we always say, if we feel that, yeah, we are going 2 steps forward, the same moment we realize that we are going 4 steps backward. That's why I call empowerment most of the times is a camouflage. It is not a reality. It should be on the personal level and it should be on the community level, and mainly the sensibility should change. I'm repeatedly telling this because our perspectives have changed. If a girl asks for her education in the household, yeah, they will say, yeah, you go, you do your MSc, you do your PhD, you go to work. They'll say all those things. But still, the, what should we say, the power structure is with the men most of the times. Most of the time. It is changing, but it's a very
it is
slow,
drastically changing.
But
If
it's a
you
very slow
ask
process.
youngsters here, they drastically it is changing, and now women are.
But still, why? Every rape is happening in this country for every half an hour. Why this is happening? Because the perspective, the way they look into women as a mere body. Do you remember Sharmila Irom?
Yeah.
Sharmila Irom, when she protested against army people in Gangtok, the army chief invited her to, not invited, she just rushes to his room. He didn't even bother to offer her a chair. He just screams looking at her. He says, what do you think you are? A pair of breasts and a vagina. What do you think? What can you do? What can you do to the army people? Yes, we rape women, we throw their body. This is the kind of the answer we got from the army chief. That's not in the last century, some 20 years back.
And we do have an example. For example, say thing is resilience and the bouncing back from all these things. But it's a fantastic example we have from Bangalore. Her name is Sunita Krishnan, and she is the founder of Ujjwala. And people who don't know her, please know. And recently she wrote her biography. And you have to, every woman has to buy it and read it. Because I'll tell you this in a short story about her. At 14, she has been gang raped. At 14. And she bounced back. Her argument is, why should I have been ashamed? The people who raped me has to be ashamed, not me. Then she bounced back in such a way, and she has rescued more than 50,000 of girls from trafficking. She is one of the biggest social worker in the India and the world, and the impact she made on the human trafficking is enormous. And the thing is, see, we always look about the other part. There are standing examples like Sunita and others. And I think we have to take a cue from them and we have to educate. As you're right. It is not a individual mindset. As a society, we have to change completely and accept it. And we always say, it is not men and women. It is a human beings. We are all human beings. We should treat each other as human beings, not with the gender or any inequality. So, to conclude this, I think we have another 5 minutes. See, now I think according to the survey now 48% or 49% of the population of India is women now. Almost equal in terms of the population, but in terms of the inclusivity and in terms of the decision making, in terms of the representation, do you think 50% reservation and 50% power to the women in this country is a right way to solve the problem?
Satish, again, it's a political move. Okay, I do agree with this, but this is not enough. This is not enough.
This is not the end. I am saying it should be a
this is not enough, because unless and until our mindset changes, if a 2-year-old girl is raped, what do you think? Isn't it? It is the disease in the mind. It is a disease in the perspective. So we need to cure that disease of male. And women is a body. I can use it and I can throw it. In a novel written by Khandekar, Yayati, wherein Sharmishta says, though it is in the temple, we have to be very careful about the hooks of our blouses. Though it is in the temple. Do you think it's a joke? That's what she asked her friend. See, this is the case. Don't look at women a mere body. Treat her as a human being. Treat her as identity. Treat her as a personality. This should be the basic thing. Unless and until this changes, rapes or any all sorts of atrocities happening on women are not going to come to an end.
I really don't know how to change that mindset.
See, let me give another example from Malayalam. Her name is, I think, Lalitambika Antarjanam. Okay? In one of her stories, a girl who has got a cycle to go to her school, it's some 60 years old story. Her 3 classmates, boys, they are so jealous of her, getting a cycle. One evening when she's returning from the school, they rape her. Okay? She went back home. Then the whole night she thinks what to do, how to react to this, whether I should share this with my family or not. At the end of the day, she thinks I don't have to disclose this to my family. What she do was, she go to school, then she invites all the 3 boys to the nearest park. Then she says, for the first boy she says, you're useless, yeah, you're not good. For the second boy she says, you're okay. And for the third boy she says, yeah, I really liked you. And those boys were shattered. They don't know how to react to this, her reaction. Okay, this is the kind of mindset even women should develop.
Ma'am, you said earlier that caste is not a barrier for women. But you said earlier that caste is not a barrier for women. But would it be the same in the case of an upper caste woman? And
it's a very important question. When it comes to upper caste women, do you think they are not going to, inclusive when it comes to lower caste women? But her opposition, her resistance is not a longer one. It's a very temporary thing for her. It's a very temporary thing for her. You read all your women writers carefully. I'm sure you are going to change your perspective on this. Take my number, we will discuss over this.
Ma'am, it's not a question, it's a clarification. The last statement that you made about how like women need to change their mindsets, can you give me a little bit more clarity on that?
See, I'm not supporting rape, okay, but at the same time, we don't have to feel that that's the end of our life. That's the end of our life. We need to come out of that because it is a kind of wound. You know, it's a kind of, what can we say? The balki again, Helena. It's a kind of
Trauma?
trauma. It's not trauma. Somebody has tried to exploit you. So don't try to become a victim of that. You come out of it. So that's what, that's the message of the last story I mentioned.
You have to be very brave because women is not made any sin. The men are the culprit here. So we have to accept that we have to move ahead in our life as they are the sinners. Yeah, I agree. I know. So let's not take on our, especially when a woman gets raped, she should not take on herself. And even the families in the society should not feel that she is the culprit. We should stand with her and we should be with her and we should allow her to bounce back in her life. At the end,
Women, at this point of time, you should outcast the culprit, isn't it? Okay? Usually, it is the victim who is being outcasted.
hopefully we will empower the voices, especially women voices. Through that we can empower the all other voiceless voices and make this country safe for everyone. Hopefully we will do that. Thank you so much, and it's wonderful to talk to you always, and a pleasure being with you all. Thank you.